The 1930s was a decade of great engineering and sporting feats. Building of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the opening of the Hume Dam, Bradman's controversial Bodyline Ashes series, and Phar Lap winning the Melbourne Cup. It saw Australia climb its way out of the Great Depression and by the end of the decade, plunged into war. In 1930, the Great Depression was at its height and the MBA membership plummeted due to businesses and branches floundering. The MBA worked tirelessly to find ways to support its members and the building industry as a whole. Special interest rates for renovations were struck, slum areas were demolished, and new houses for the disadvantaged were built to create work for the building trades. By mid-1933, the building industry started to rebound. Former MBA President James McIntyre became New South Wales' first Apprenticeship Commissioner, introducing trainee apprenticeship practices that were then adopted by the whole building industry. The number of completed buildings being constructed jumping a couple of thousand every year. Buildings of this period include the Moydant in Bowral, T&G Building in Elizabeth Street, Shell House in Wynyard Square, and Hotel Canobolas in Orange.
The Canobolas Hotel, that was built by Max Cooper and Sons. In those days, the hotel was usually had the best restaurant in town. And whenever they talked about the leading hotels in New South Wales, they include the Canobolas Hotel.
As well as Max Cooper and Sons, two other important MBA members were William Kell and Les Rigby, two carpenters who had arrived independently from England. Their partnership built a number of important buildings in Sydney, including the Bunurong Power Station, Australian War Memorial in Hyde Park, and the Grace Hotel.
They built that hotel because they thought that the whole of Sydney would gravitate around the bridge being built, but it didn't. It remained the GPO as virtually its centre. It later was taken over during the Second World War by the United States Army, and now it's converted to a hotel again.
In 1939, World War II began and Robert Menzies became Prime Minister. The building industry was hit again. Restrictions were put on the building of any places of amusement, including hotels and offices, so to funnel money and men into the war effort. But the MBA survived and helped lobby for smaller work parcels to help enable builders with limited capital to be able to tender for more work. Following the war was a period of unrest. Strikes at the Bunurong powerhouse caused power shortages. There were steel disputes and gas strikes. But by 1950, Australia was into a long economic boom. Wool exports rose, weekly wages increased, and with rising prosperity came greater demand for builders. Height restrictions that had been introduced in 1912 were also finally lifted. Australia's first official modern skyscraper, the Kulwala Chambers, opening in December 1958.
You couldn't build over a certain height in Sydney until the late 1950s because of the ladders for the fire engines didn't go any higher than about 12 stories. And so you couldn't have any multi-storey buildings.
Australia took its place on the world stage, hosting the 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games. But the crowning glory of the building industry at this time was the creation of a dedicated performing arts centre in Sydney. In 1955, Bennelong Point was declared the site for the proposed new Opera House, and on the 15th of February 1956, Premier Cahill released an international competition for a national opera house at Bennelong Point. Special lotteries were run to fund its construction, and in March 1959, construction finally began. A bronze plaque commemorating this day can still be found on the steps of the Opera House.